Hello, everyone. I hope you all can hear me. If you cannot hear me, please, you could type in the chat box and I'll try to assist you. But other than that, it is 6:05 p.m. and welcome to the Hanover Adventure Tours Adventure Talk series. We're so happy to have you all join us tonight. We are going to be talking about biking across the nation and the journey with Robert Chambers and Kim Chambers. Before we get started though, I'd love to tell you all a little bit about Hanover Adventure Tours. Just so you guys know, my name's Jane Traylor and I am representing Hanover Adventure Tours tonight. We've been around for a year and I have pretty much been here since the beginning, so it's been such a journey. So Hanover Adventure Tours is located right along the beautiful Connecticut River, and we live and breathe exploration and outdoor enjoyment. And what do I mean by that? Well, Hanover Adventure Tours works towards being the adventure center of the Upper Valley. We want to provide anything to get outdoors and have a good time, from rentals to tours, to even events and some fun things just like the Adventure Talk series tonight. So to dive into some of the rentals we have here, is one thing we do is electric bicycle rentals. We have over 15 different models of electric bikes where you can take out just a nice cruiser to go around town, or be a little more adventurous and take the mountain trails of Vermont. And even, hey, it's the winter right now, we could take out some fat tire electric bikes and go through that snow, no problem. We like to provide everything you would need for an adventure here in the Upper Valley. So when you take a rental of an electric bike, all bike accessories are included, and you have over 70 different pre-planned routes to choose from. We work towards taking you to the roads less traveled, finding those hidden gems, or meeting one of the local farmers. It's always a whole lot of fun. Now, we also, all the electric bikes that we have on our floor are for sale. We, like I'd said, have over 15 different models, and we also service bikes. So any questions you may have, or if you needed to get the bike, any bike service, we could definitely have those questions for you and get that figured out. So going back into rentals though, we do work towards having rentals and pretty much adventure every season. So when it does start to warm up, we, like I said, are along the Connecticut River. So you can take out a canoe or a kayak or even a paddleboard and explore the river and its beauty. There's those options, as well as taking out an e-bike. And for the winter, as we know, it's been snowing all day in the Upper Valley. We do have a couple options, from snowshoeing to winter hiking and fat tire e-biking. So everything there is to get out there. So in addition to rentals and sales, we also have tours as Hanover Adventure Tours. So there's a lot of different ways you can take a tour. We have a private coach. We also have e-bike tours or even snowshoeing tours. Some tours that we have are, say, the historical Dartmouth tour, where you can learn a little bit about Dartmouth College. We also have a brewery and distillery tour where you can get a taste of the Upper Valley, as well as, say, the Woodstock Farmland tour, where you'll discover the back roads of Vermont while visiting local farms and, you know, tasting the yummy, delicious Vermont maple syrup. So many options there. And in addition to that, one other thing is right alongside the Adventure Center is we have a hostel. We actually provide lodging and have over 28 beds available. Now that's private rooms and dormitories, as well as a bunk room. So a lot of options to take with Hanover Adventure Tours, and we just want to let you all know that we're here right along the river and are can provide an adventure. Other than that, we work towards being part of the community. And that's one of our biggest goals. And doing these adventure talk series, just like tonight, is to connect with the community. And, you know, it's an educational and exciting talks too. We've had a couple of these adventure talk series, including some about the Appalachian Trail, to also the Colorado Trail and electric biking. And for tonight, we're talking about biking across the nation. That seems very exciting for me, and I hope for all of you. And we have Robert Chambers and Kim Chambers joining us tonight. They are the father and daughter duo that took this journey on in 2011 and are here to share their experiences, their struggles, and the full-on most amazing adventure, I would think. So other than that, that's a little bit about Hanover Adventure Tours, and I am going to bring Kim and Robert in. But before we start too, I'd love for you all to look at the lower hand part of your screen. There's a couple of things there that you'll see. One of them would be to raise your hand. You are more than welcome to raise your hand during the presentation if you were to have a question. This is an open discussion, so if you did have a question, you could raise your hand. You could also use the chat, that's another option. But what I would highly suggest is the Q&A button that you see on the lower hand of your screen. That's going to be the question and answers. And during the presentation, you can definitely pop a question in there, and Kim or Robert will try to answer it during the presentation. But if they don't get to it at that time, they'll definitely answer it at the end, as we do have a part where we'll go through a Q&A session. So just so you all know, it is there. But now I'm going to add in Kim and Robert, and I hope you all enjoy learning about biking across the nation. All right, just 1 second as I get them on. There we go. Oh, hi, Kim. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Jane?
I am great. So happy you could join us. Oh, and there's Robert. Hi there.
Hello.
Can you hear us? Okay. And if
Yes.
any of you can't hear, please let us know through the chat. But welcome, y'all.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we just want to go ahead and get this started. That showing all right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I'm actually going to stop my video now so you all can take the stage, but enjoy.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kim, and this is Robert. He is my father. We decided to do this bike trip across the country in 2011. So we had decided this because my father had been part of a biking group in the Upper Valley, which is located in Hanover, New Hampshire and surrounding towns. And he had gone out with many bike trips with a bunch of his buddies, including a very long trip to Virginia. And I, as a 12-year-old, became extremely jealous and wanted to also do that. So it became a lifelong dream that then years later, we decided to bike across the country together. This is just a couple facts to get us started. So we did start in New Hampshire. We drove all the way across to San Francisco. We made this decision because we wanted to go from west to east. That's
with the prevailing wind.
Made that decision because of the prevailing wind. We did drive in the course of 4 days. We didn't sleep tons because we just rotated the 4 people who we were traveling with, which is myself, Robert, and 2 other friends, Sarah and Alex. So the 3 of us were bikers and Alex was our driver. We made that decision because we wanted to be able to have someone effectively carry our stuff for us, so then we could actually take the time to stop and smell the roses and do all the biking. We left here in May of 2011, and we ended up finishing the trip at the end of July. We had 1 van, which we stacked with 4 Walmart giant-sized crates, and everyone had their own crate. Effectively, your crate was your bedroom. You could keep it as dirty or as messy or clean as you wanted to. That was your clothes, your books, and anything you wanted to have for the entire 3 months. And we stacked them in the back of the van, and that was where we kept all of our stuff. Behind which we also pulled the pop-up sleeper, which you can see here in this picture. This is the giant pop-up sleeper on the left-hand side, and you can see on the right-hand picture here that there were 3 beds effectively. Sarah and I slept in the queen-size bed. Alex slept on the couch in front of us. There's a door to the outside. There's a kitchenette located right across, and then Robert slept on the opposite side, which was a pull-out twin bed as well. So we all had our individual sleeping space, but we were definitely pretty cozy for 3 months of traveling together. This was a couple photos taken while we did our drive across. We started, as we said, in New Hampshire and drove all the way across. Because we had 4 people, we would rotate the sleeping and the driving together. One person would drive, the other person would sit up and talk to them while we were driving and commuting to make sure they stayed awake. And the 2 people in the back had their individual time to either sleep or read a book or whatever they wanted to. And one of the first adventures we encountered was the tornado.
Right. There was we were traveling at night. We left late afternoon, about 5 o'clock from Hanover, and we got a call from Kimberly's mom that said that there was a tornado near the route that we were on, and this was the largest tornado in the U.S. history, a class 5 that destroyed several communities. It was only a few miles over, and we looked and figured it out where it was, and we just kept going and outran it. It was going the other direction.
And that was located somewhere around Ohio, if we remember correctly. And then we decided to make a stop in Estes Park, Colorado on our drive over. You can see these snowbanks. As we said, this is the end of May, but that just shows you the elevation difference. And you can see me for height difference of how much snowbank there is going up these mountains. But we took the time to get up and see an amazing sunrise before hitting the road, showering at a truck stop, and driving the rest of the way to San Francisco. So here's a map that can kind of show you a little bit of the way we decided to do this. We did not follow traditional biking routes. Most bikers that choose to bike across the country follow a straight line. We did not do that. Most people either go on the top of the country, the middle of the country, or the southern section of the country. We wanted to make this all an experience, and my dad really wanted to see Yosemite, and we had family in San Francisco. So we decided to start in San Francisco and go to Yosemite first.
And we also wanted to see the Grand Teton National Park and Yellowstone.
Those, highly recommend going to those national parks if you get the chance to. So we made it to San Francisco. We traveled and explored there with some family. We did take about 4 or 5 days once we got to San Francisco to explore, see the Golden Gate Bridge, go around and visit with family. But eventually we did start our first day. We wanted to start with our back wheels in the Pacific and of course end with our front wheel in the Atlantic. So we got this great picture of getting saltwater ruining our bicycles. We did, I promise, wipe our bikes down afterwards. And unfortunately, on day 3, there was a crash. So we had started the couple of days by biking just 20 miles at a time because we didn't want to overstress our legs, and the hills of San Francisco are very strenuous. And on our 3rd day, my dad and Alex decided to take to get the trailer out of the city, because getting it out of the city with all the traffic was a mess. So the 2 of them were helping together, and Sarah and I went on to just do another quick section, only about 20 or 30 miles. And unfortunately, we encountered some pretty big hills immediately. And this crash happened because I was going down the back of a switchback and I crashed. It was marked 10 miles an hour for vehicles. I unfortunately hit that going 35 miles an hour. I tried to turn my bike and just basically laid my bike down on the ground. Got some pretty nasty road rash on my leg and my arm and my chin and just about everywhere else. But Sarah behind me, seeing me crash, she braked really hard and she actually flipped her bike the opposite side, and broke her finger and scratched up her elbow on the opposite side. And no one was with us, and we were in the back of a hill with no cell phone service. That's where we encountered Michael. Michael was driving a truck by. We waved him down, made sure he wasn't a serial killer, and he threw us in the back of his truck and took us back to his house to kind of just give us the opportunity for my dad and Alex to meet up with us safely. While we were there, I called a couple medical professionals. I did not actually end up going to a hospital. It didn't feel like I really needed to. I just kind of dug some dirt and grime and gravel out of my leg and kind of called it a day. But we did have the opportunity to meet with Michael's parents while we were there.
Michael's dad, who you see here, is a nuclear physicist, and he was the very first nuclear physicist that worked at the Los Alamos laboratories.
So while the crash itself was
which are near there. So
So while the crash itself was unfortunate, we ended up getting lifelong friends, and we've stayed in touch with Michael and actually gone out sailing with him and his family after this happened. Michael did give us many recommendations on where to go, because we were on a path that apparently was going to be much hillier. But nonetheless, we ended up coming out on Carson Pass, coming out of Modesto, California, which was where Michael was located. Carson Pass.
Carson Pass is 60 miles of uphill, and while Kim and Sarah could have made it up there, it took me 2 days, so they had to wait for me. It took me 2 days to get up that hill.
These are some of the biggest hills I think I've ever seen, and an e-bike definitely would have helped, but you would have run the battery up like nobody's business. And something that we definitely learned on our bike trip was that you build a lot of muscle along the way. So while we were still in day 4 or 5, our muscles weren't as strong as they were towards the end of our trip. Once we made it
you
through,
see the elevation listed there at 8,574 feet. That's 2,300 feet higher than Mount Washington.
So once we made it over Carson Pass, even though it took us a few days to do it, we made it into Yosemite. We definitely took many days to hike through Yosemite, see all the waterfalls, explore. And part of the issue that we were having too is that I was still in a lot of pain due to my crash. So we were taking we were traveling with less miles than we might have done otherwise. While we might have had the capacity to do 50 or 100 mile days, while we were taking the time to go through Yosemite, we would do 20, 30, or 40 or 50 mile days instead, especially because the hills in that area are much higher than they are in New England.
We really had a terrific time there at Yosemite, met some really interesting people, and did several hikes on our own as well.
That's not hard, is it? In addition, so one of the main questions. Go ahead.
Well, when we left Yosemite, I just lost the. Oh, there it is. Okay. We were going across Nevada and on the loneliest highway in America. And at one point, there's literally 100 miles between gas stations. And that's where there weren't really very many gas stations and snack breaks along some of that section there.
And one of the main questions I presume we will probably run into is asking us where we went to the restroom or what we did for food or everything else. And a lot of what we would do is we would go to gas stations. Since Alex was driving the van, he would stop at a gas station. He'd of course have to fill the car. And in doing so, he'd also stop by grocery stores, fill up a massive cooler that we had in the back. And he would kind of act as our personal chauffeur, where he would go and get sliced turkey or bread and chips and whatever else we wanted to travel with and we would often just make a sandwich on the road or stop at gas stations to use the restroom. And when you're biking that many miles, you burn a lot of calories, so you eat a lot.
You do, and one of the things that we drank a lot of was chocolate milk. Lance Armstrong's had a private nutritionist that helped him when he was winning the Tour de France, and he had done research on recovery, and the chocolate or strawberry milk with the sugar and the protein ended up being is considered a perfect recovery drink. And so we took advantage of that knowledge and would stop and grab a little chocolate milk at all these gas stations.
One of the best places we did end up going to as we were coming through Nevada was that we ended up on US 50, which is known as the loneliest road in America. And while going along US 50 with nothing to see or nothing to do for about 30 miles on either side is this place called, Middle Gate Station. And you can see population 17 because nobody lives around here. However, it's somehow a bar, a campsite, a grocery store, a pool hall, gas station, restaurant, car mechanic. They have the biggest burgers in the world, and we stopped here for the night for as a campsite and had some of the best food. So I highly recommend, if anybody's on Route 50, I highly recommend doing this.
I have to tell a quick story here. Our driver, Alex, they had a challenge inside this store. That they had a burger and fries, and if you could eat it all, you got it free. And literally it was like 2 pounds of hamburger on a whole loaf of bread, and then French fries. And Alex didn't make it.
He put in a good effort though.
That was the sort of thing. And on Friday nights, everybody comes out of the hills down there and they dance and raise hell and get drunk and do whatever people out in Nevada do on weekends.
Do whatever people in the middle of nowhere do. But if you make it out onto the loneliest road, definitely stop at Middle Gate Station. The next little story we stopped into was something called the Shoe Tree. It's still on Route 50. This is a picture of the shoe tree. So this is a world famous actually tree. It's a massive cottonwood that's on Route 50, and it started from a story from a newlywed argument. So decades ago, a couple was driving along Highway 50 shortly after getting married at a wedding chapel in Reno. Their marital bliss didn't last very long because they got into an argument while on the road. They pulled over next to an outcropping of trees on the side of the road, and the woman stormed off, stating she'd rather walk home. The man reacted by angrily grabbing her shoes and tossing them into a nearby tree before driving off in a huff. He drove directly to the nearest bar, probably Middle Gate Station for the record, and with the help of a bartender was convinced to return to the tree and make up with the woman. He did just that, and rumor has it the couple lived happily ever after. They would return to the shoe tree on their anniversary every year and toss a pair of shoes up into the tree as a symbol of their unbreakable love for each other. And as you can see, everyone else who comes by here now throws a pair of shoes up for good luck in the love department.
There's now thousands of pairs on that tree.
Thousands of pairs of trees at this point, of shoes at this point. We did not throw our biking shoes because those were important, and we were using, all of us had cleats on. If you're an avid biker, you're aware of what cleats are. They make it so you can pull up and push down at the same time. It made all the difference in biking, even on the straight roads of Nevada, because when we're on straight roads, we hit some pretty nasty headwinds sometimes. We made
These
it
were
in.
some traveling, well,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, these are some traveling, people that we met on our trip across the country. And these two guys were teachers. I believe that they were from Virginia, but both of them had participated in the full Hawaiian Ironman, and we tried to keep up with them for about a mile or two, and then they kind of left us. But then we had dinner with them later that night in the same town that they stopped in. But you meet some interesting people, and you see that gorgeous views of the snow-covered mountains behind us.
Coming out of Nevada, we made it into Idaho, and one of the first things we discovered when we got there was that there is actually a volcano. So there's a really fun national park that I'd recommend traveling to, and it's in central Idaho, and it's called Craters of the Moon, and it was quite interesting. But of course, we were kind of just biking through, but this is one of those places where we biked 10 miles, said, oh, this is interesting, and we actually wanted to stop. So we took the time to, you know, walk around and explore, and we might not have biked as far as we were planning, but we never let that deter us from where we went. We always knew the next night where we were going to stay. We made it as a decision as we went. And we said, okay, tomorrow night we'll sleep at this campsite. We'd go ahead and book it, call ahead and put our credit card down for it. And if we never biked that far, we would have Alex pick us up where we were ending, drive us there, and effectively slack pack us back. So he would drive us back to the spot that we had stopped at, so that we could then bike the rest of the distance. So we never missed a mile, but sometimes we would sleep ahead of where we actually had already biked by.
Our typical routine was to get up. Sarah and Kim and I would get up early and leave biking. Alex would sleep in and would take the pop-up down, and then he would come and if there was a convenient lunch stop, and we tried to stop early so we'd miss the crowds, he would join us for lunch, and then he would go and set up camp wherever we had this. And every night we would decide about how far we're going to go. We'd look at the weather, and if it was raining, we might sleep in, and if we were feeling good and the winds were going to be right, we might pick a longer map. But that was kind of the routine that we got into.
It was definitely really nice to have the flexibility to say, I don't feel well, let's do 20 miles, or I just did this research and we found a volcano, or tomorrow looks like it's going to be 90 and sunny, let's just swim in this lake all day instead of biking. And we would pick and choose how we wanted to travel. And part of our route planning is that we also definitely wanted to stay off of major highways. We primarily traveled on state highways, but as you can see, we definitely biked alongside cars for the most part. West of the Mississippi, it is actually legal to bike on an interstate. We did have to do that going through North Dakota because there was flooding in northern North Dakota where we would have traveled normally. So pretty much the entire state of North Dakota, which we have not gotten to yet, but when we get to it, we effectively just did 100-mile days on the interstate to get through it. Here we made it to Wyoming. And as you can see, we saw a lot of wildlife, including a moose, and we would take the car and drive around. I mean, we always, as I said, never missed a mile, but we didn't want to miss seeing the landmines and miss seeing these great places. And if we could get a reservation at one of the top restaurants or country bars or something to go to, we would take the car, drive, go see it, explore it, try some things, go to a museum, and then make sure we'd bike again the next day or the day after. We did do a lot of hiking.
The Grand Tetons are absolutely beautiful. If you've never been up there, I highly recommend it. You can tell how early in the season we are. There was still a lot of snow on the ground there.
Mm-hmm. And as you can see in this picture, we saw more wildlife. And one of the great stories was this bear. And for the record, we did actually take every single picture in this deck. So we were close enough to take these pictures ourselves.
And this bear picture was taken by Alex, our driver, and the ranger came over there and said, "You're going to be dead in a minute. You got to get out of here," because there were three cubs with that mother bear, and she wasn't going to mess. I mean, that was a big bear. He said she won't mess with you. You know, if she starts coming at you, you'll be mincemeat.
This is Jenny Lake, which is also right outside the Grand Tetons. This is Alex swimming in it, and it was probably early to mid-June, and that water was absolutely frigid. I did touch it with my finger, but I was not getting in it. So we did have one person want to do an ice challenge of some sort. Coming out of the Grand Tetons, we went into Yellowstone. Took the time to go to all of the different sections throughout that park. It is a circle, so you do want to take the time to go around all of it. And while doing that, we would bike 20 or 30 miles at a time. We stayed at the same campsite, so we could actually not have to pick up and move regularly, but we wanted to hike. We wanted to see the falls, see the different, see the geysers and all the different things that are at Yosemite. And since it's such a large circle, we took the time to slowly make sure we went around and saw every piece of it while we were there. I think we were there for probably 4 or 5 days.
For a good bit of time. And it's really beautiful.
It is absolutely gorgeous. But as you can see, I mean, even though we're at about 7,000 or so feet in elevation, it was warm enough that during the day we could be in, tank tops, and it was pretty hot. Coming out of Yellowstone, we took a highway called Beartooth Pass, which is a road. There's multiple passes to get out of Yellowstone. Beartooth Pass is the one I would recommend if you ever get the chance to go out there. And it does connect between Wyoming and Montana since it's right on the border. It is only open for about 2 months of the year, if I'm correct, because so much snow often ends up shutting it down. And for the record, this store that calls itself the Top of the World store is only about 40 miles up this hill of the 60 miles. So it's about 20 miles short of being on the top, which is a tease.
This road was built during Roosevelt's time by the work programs that they had, and it's only opened, they opened it up in July. This is where the U.S. national ski team practices in the summertime.
And as you can see, this is the end of June, early July, end of June, I believe, and there's still a ton of snow. What you can, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, look at the switchback there, and then here's another picture of it.
While we were biking over this, there was actually some downhill skiers practicing, and they were jumping over our heads as well, which was quite fascinating. And to reference the switchbacks here, these were such massive switchbacks with such big winds, and we were up at 11,000 feet in elevation, that going one direction on a switchback, you would be going 2 miles an hour and sweating, and it was really hard because you had a massive headwind. And then you'd go the other direction you'd be going, with a headwind, you'd be hot, and then you go the other direction, and all of a sudden you're going 15 miles an hour and you're not even trying, and you have this massive tailwind, but it's freezing. So you just went from hot and cold the entire way. And at the top, you get to Montana.
And I can proudly say that I biked every mile of it.
1 foot at a time is the way to go.
If you've never been there, I think that Beartooth Pass is the most beautiful spot in America. You can see like 12 different mountains that are over 12,000 feet high from there. It's just absolutely a spectacular views all around.
And it's a really good excuse that when you're tired to stop and just say, I'm enjoying the view, but you're really taking a break. So we made it to Montana, and Beartooth Pass goes up a long ways, and then it's a really quick down. So we definitely had to challenge our brakes a lot. We made sure they were oiled up and ready to go, because it's just straight down. There is no stopping. I think we were down all 20 miles in about 10 minutes. We definitely had to bundle up and put on jackets and layers and everything else. So we were grateful that Alex met us at the top of this before we went back down. And
after we got to the bottom, which was Red Hook, I guess Montana there, it was like 30 degrees up on the top, and it was 80 degrees down at the bottom when we got there.
We finished that day with a rainbow and 80 degrees, and then we had a really good dinner and went to bed. So here's a quick look at the rest of our trip. We went through Montana, shot up through North Dakota. As mentioned, we were on the interstate in North Dakota just to shoot across. We made a pit stop in Fargo, went through Wisconsin, Chicago, over through Michigan, into Canada for a brief stint, into New York, and then all the way back to New Hampshire. Here's just a quick look at some campsites. The picture in the top's not as great, but that kind of alludes to some of what we would do for dinner. Marshmallows or hot dogs, and we'd make a campfire if we're able to. We always had, a big thing of pasta because you need to carb load when you're eating like that. And here's a picture of just one of our views. We stayed in many different campsites, some on hills, some next to rivers. We even stayed on one that was on some guy's farm, and we got woken up by roosters at 3 a.m. But it was
that was in Minnesota, and we couldn't find a campsite, and Alex was stopping at a little store asking where we might find a camp, and this young woman says, "Well, come over to my house." And so we went over to her house. It was a young couple there in Minnesota they were maybe a little older than Kim. They weren't as old and nearly as old as me. They were in their late 20s, 30s. Early 30s. Mm-hmm. And they had never been out of the state of Minnesota. They'd never even been out of their county, I don't think. And they were just totally flabbergasted that we were biking across the country. And so they brought out some organic burgers that they had grown and fed us, and we told stories about our trip, and they told stories about their life, which was really phenomenal. We had many times when we had wonderful company and stories of people, local people, really just being fascinated with our trip.
And being amazing people. A lot of people just extended a hand to help us or say hi or just wanted to hear us from somebody, which was amazing. Again, just traveling through. I'm not sure which section this was in, as we went over a couple more mountains, but whenever we'd have a view, we tried to take a picture and do what we were able to. I can comment, which we kind of skipped over because I don't have a picture of it. When we went through Fargo, my dad actually crashed. So we actually had all three of us crash, unfortunately, on this trip. His crash happened because Sarah was right in front of him and he was drafting her, which if you're a biker, I mean, that's huge for going a lot further distances. So you can have one person do a little bit more of the effort and then you can rotate. And Sarah was not quite as experienced with biking until after this trip, obviously. And she dropped her iPod that she was listening to and braked really hard and didn't realize that he was drafting behind her, and his front wheel hit her back wheel. And due to the way all bikes are set up, it flung him into the bushes, and we were on an interstate. Luckily, this is why you always bike with traffic, because your bike is meant to throw you into the weeds rather than into traffic. So always bike with traffic, not the opposite direction.
Yes, and we didn't take as many pictures on the last half of our route. Can you flip back to the last half of the route on the map there, Kim?
There we go.
Yeah, and so you can see where we went through down to Chicago and through Minnesota, and in Minnesota we had a phenomenal time on some of the 10,000 lakes on the 4th of July. That was when Minnesota had closed their entire state, and all the state parks were closed. And on the 4th of July, we didn't have any place to stay, so we pulled up at this. It was a permanent camp, an RV place, and went in and said, "Hey, we're biking across the country," and they didn't really have any room. But the owner went out and moved two of the RVs over and made room for us, and we had a phenomenal time watching. They had a karaoke sing along, and those Minnesotans know how to shoot fireworks. Everybody tries to beat everybody else. It was really fascinating. And then we went down to Minneapolis and stayed with one of Sarah's relatives and saw another firework, the 4th of July. So we got 2 fireworks displays that year.
Yes, we did. And part of why we took less pictures in the second half of our trip is that we were biking so far. And also I think we started to feel monotonous. So it started to be the little moments and those ones you can't take pictures of. But towards the second half of our trip, we were biking between 90 and 120 miles most days. We would just get up early, we would cruise, and we would go. When we got into Chicago, we actually went to a festival. Sarah and I went to a music festival, and my dad just stayed by the pool because we were visiting some family and relatives down there, which was nice to just relax for a little bit and do something that felt kind of human when we were just biking through the world at the time.
If you see on the map there where Chicago is, our initial plan was to take a ferry across Lake Michigan and then continue on the other side. And when we got there, we found out that it was going to cost $750 to take the car and the trailer across the ferry. And so Sarah had this aunt that lived in Chicago, so we decided to drive down to Chicago. They went to that performance, and then we woke up and then drove back up to where the ferry would have ended and started our bike ride again.
So we officially did not bike through Chicago. We pretended we swam, I guess.
Right. And then you see where we're close to Toronto. Well, that was a section where we actually biked at night. The temperatures got up over 100 degrees, and I couldn't bike in that. The girls probably could have survived it, but they were a lot younger. And at night we started checking into a motel and sleeping during the day with the air conditioning, and then having Alex drive behind us at night. So we biked across Canada and came back across the Niagara Falls at 5:30 in the morning after we finished that section in Canada.
Yeah, coming back into the United States at 5 a.m. with the sunrise over Niagara Falls was a gorgeous moment. We were so tired we didn't get any pictures of that. But it was quite interesting to become nocturnal, but that was honestly the only way to do it. Even in the middle of the night, we were sweating. There was a national heat index, and when this far north in the United States is 110, I can't even imagine what it would have been if we had been biking through Tennessee or Texas.
Yeah, you can go ahead to the other pictures if you want.
Some of these are just pictures of biking through. We biked along the Erie Canal at some point.
Swimming in the Erie Canal also.
Swimming in the Erie Canal. We stopped a ton to swim in Michigan. And as you can see, we kind of mixed it up. Some days we'd be wearing just a bathing suit instead of full bike gear. And other days we'd be in a full bike gear if we knew we were going to do further travel. So we kind of played it by ear as we went.
Whenever there was a lake that we came close to, we would stop and go swimming. And somebody named a cafe after me, so we had to get a picture.
Had to get a picture. And as you can see in this picture of Sarah and I biking, and my dad also had this one, we always were wearing helmets. Sometimes we would wear gloves and sometimes not. It would depend on how far we were going that day. All three of us had a side and back mirror. So Sarah's and mine were attached to our helmets versus my dad preferred his to be on his handlebars. But we all became very proficient at seeing the traffic, using hand signals. And I mean, when you're on a bike that much, you become one with it. And woke up a lot very early to beat the heat, as well as to make sure that we beat the wind. The wind would always pick up in the afternoon, so we always would start really early. And then coming into the ending of our bike trip, we made it through New York. We got through Rochester, and then we made it and stopped at this place called Herkimer in New York. And we were planning on doing Herkimer to stop in maybe Glens Falls or...
No, Rutland.
Which is somewhere.
Yeah, Rutland was 144 miles, and which I tested. Herkimer, New York, was famous for its diamond mines, and they had a bunch of other things going on. But it's on the Erie Canal right there, which we had stayed and went swimming, and they had showers at the dock there. but we got up early and biked to Rutland, Vermont, 144 miles, and it was getting dark. We got in about 6 or 6:30 in the evening, and we're starting to look for where we're going to put our pop-up, and Kimberly said, "Dad, we're this close to home, we can't stop now." so we had a big meal, reached stoked, had a couple more chocolate milks, and then Alex drove behind us, and we went up over Killington Mountain and biked into Hanover from after going over Killington, and it ended up being a 200-mile day, which was our longest day.
So we did all 200 miles in one day. We did bike overnight, and got to call my mom to be like, please get my bed ready. I've been sleeping in a camper for 2.5 months, and I really want a real shower and a bed and a change of clothes because I've been living out of a box for 3 months. So we did all 200 miles in one sitting. It did include quite a few Red Bulls to keep us awake, or coffee, just to, when you're biking for that long, you get ready to fall asleep. It's like driving when you're tired. So same kind of thing happens. Made it into Hanover at 5:30 in the morning, and then we slept for I think we slept for the full day and rested. So we were home for about 36 hours. And then we jumped on our bikes to bike the 120 miles over to Hampton Beach, where we finished with our front wheel in the Atlantic. And so far, the only question I was able to see so far was about the Prouty jersey. That was not recognized from what I can tell. As far as I can tell, that was not recognized by anybody, but as we did get a little bit closer, I think a couple people in New York commented on it, but all the way out in California, I don't think anybody's heard about the Prouty so far.
Just to add a little bit about the Prouty, when Kim was, I don't know whether it was 12 or 13 years old, she was the youngest person that did the Prouty and did the 100 miles of the Prouty that year. So she got her picture in the Valley News. And that was like 5 years before this trip. Or Absolutely. 6 years.
If there are any other questions, I would be happy to help answer any of those questions. Both of us are happy to tell more stories if you want. Tell us about your bikes. Okay, so I actually still have the same bike that I've had for years. I got it when I was 12 or 13 years old to be able to bike the Prouty, because I grew up with a dad who loved biking, so I was obsessed. So I had I believe, women's specialized Dolce, I think if that's correct. And it is at its max peak in terms of height, because I grew obviously from 12 to the age that I am now. And it worked like a charm. I actually only ever had flat tires, which we had many of. I personally only ever had flat tires in my front, in my back. For some reason, my front tire actually made it all 4,000 miles, never had a flat. And then of course, a couple weeks later, it got flat for no reason. But that was my bike, and I still ride that bike as my primary road bike today. And Dad?
Yeah, and I rode a pretty standard Specialized that I think I paid about $1,500 for, but then I customized everything. I changed the handlebars so they were as wide as my shoulders. I changed the length of the crank arms because I wanted to use a longer crank arm length. I put in different derailleur system on it, and then I started off with a cushion layer on the handlebars, and every 4 days when my hands would get numb, I would stop and put another one on, and I ended up with 3 different total layers of gel underneath my handlebar, so that my hands really weren't on a little bar. They had some real padding, and then I never had issues after I put that 3rd layer of handlebar things on. And the saddles were these are typical road bike saddles, which everybody says these little skinny things, how can you ride on them? But once you have been hours in on the saddle, you develop muscles that help support you, and they chafe a whole lot less than the bigger saddles. So that's why people kind of use small saddles. And there's something called, and the basic name is butt butter, but it's silicone lubricant for bicycles, and we use a lot of that when you're getting your muscles in shape without developing anything. Hi, Jane.
One other question that we did have as well was, did we have any bicycle breakdowns? So my bike, due to my crash in the beginning, definitely had a couple issues. My derailleur got really, really funky, I think in terms of hitting it, because I laid my bike on the ground. Trying to get up Carson Pass, which was one of the big hills that we went up after that. I'm pretty sure I went up it in my biggest gear, and I was just ready to rip my hair out because those hills were big enough anyway, and I didn't need the extra workout, but it happened. So that was one of the biggest ones. The rest of it was really just generic flat tires. We didn't really have any big bicycle breakdowns. You know, if you run over glass or anything else, all three of us got really comfortable using our hands with gloves to wipe down. So we tried to get glass out, but we definitely had one circumstance where the glass never really got cleaned out of the tube itself. So we would change the tire and it would get flat again, and then we'd change it again and it would be flat again. So it happened 3 or 4 times before we finally said we need to just like totally strip it. And about every 1,000 miles, I think we stopped at a bike shop and said we want a full tune-up, like run through it with everything.
Yeah, that was a pretty good. We did get Kim's bike fixed in the town, the other side of Carson Pass. I've forgotten, it was in Nevada, but in that town, we drove over to a bike shop there, and he, I don't know whether he put a new derailleur, but he got it fixed. So I don't think she had any more problems with that after that.
Right. Another question we just had come in was asking about the group dynamic and morale. So the group dynamic was definitely a little interesting because it had been a goal for my dad and I to do this. And Sarah is one of my closest friends. We rode together in high school at Hanover High. And I'd reached out to her and said, hey, I'm going to do this. Do you want to come? And she'd always been outdoorsy and adventurous. So it was kind of like, sure, let's go. So that's how she got looped into it. And Alex ended up we kind of basically put an ad in Craigslist of like, we want a driver. We'll pay for your food and board effectively if you want to come do that. And it ended up being a little weird dynamic at first because then Alex and Sarah started dating halfway through, and that shifted our dynamic rather drastically. They're now married and have 2 kids. So it actually worked out really well. It kind of was a matchmaker style, unintentional. But that also was great because that meant while they were kind of wanted to go on a couple dates, my dad and I got some more, father-daughter bonding time. So it actually worked out all in all pretty well. I think morale went on regular waves where sometimes we'd be super high because we always had endorphins. But then sometimes it'd be really frustrating. With my crash, I definitely had a couple of days where I was in so much pain that I had trouble sleeping, and then I was like, I'm never going to do this, but I just kind of, worked my way through it. And yeah, that was probably my biggest morale down was like the pain in the beginning being like, of course I crashed on day 3.
I want to say thank you guys too. Great presentation, really enjoying it all. And I know the questions will continue to come in. I even have some questions of my own, and it was kind of about the bicycle breakdowns, but also the overall maintenance. I know, Robert, you explained how you guys you got it tuned up, but would you lube the chain like every night? Like, would you do anything after a day of riding, or every other day, or every week?
Just wipe the chain off when you get in, and if you don't really want, if you lube it every day, then you get up too much lubrication, and then it starts picking up dirt and dust, and then the dirt then grinds down your chain and grinds down your cogs. So so you want to wipe it off and make sure that it's clean and lubricated, but you don't need a lot of lubrication.
Yeah. I was going to say our go-to nightly was just if it poured, wipe it down with a rag, like wipe the bike down with a rag. But for the most part, we didn't really do, yeah, I mean, we'd oil it. We had oil, we had everything with us, but we would do it kind of on a weekly, throw a little oil, but like touch it up, but like not over oil it so it didn't get too much dirt. I do think we went through a few chains. I think when we went into those bike shops every 1,000 miles, I think we just said, give me a whole new chain on there, because we were grinding them a little bit.
Yeah, changing the chains about every 1,000 miles probably is something that makes sense, and then you don't get problems while you're out on the road. Also, we used bikes that had quite strong spokes in them, because really light racing bicycles, they use really thin spokes, and when you're putting miles after miles on them, you just don't want to have one of your spokes go when you're out off the road. I never was very good at truing wheels, and so I wanted our wheels to stay straight.
Oh yeah. A lot of miles. So
yeah.
Yeah, we did about 4,000 miles is what we figured after we did this, and I highly recommend, if anybody that's thought about trying to do this, to plan your own route. That's we did this on a day-by-day basis, but we had the original goal. We're going to start in San Francisco. We're going to go to Yosemite. We're going to go to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and go to Yellowstone, and then we're going to find our way home from there. And so we did a lot of planning along the way that meant that everybody thought they were participating in what was going on, and if somebody didn't feel good and said, hey, I'd like to have an easy day, then we'd take an easy day.
I think for us, that was the best part. It made it so that the experience was actually a full, and no one felt overly stressed, and we had the time. I was on a break between college years, not on a break. I was on a summer, but college summer tends to be a little bit longer than everybody else's summer. So I had that opportunity, and he was working in real estate at the time. So we actually both had the flexibility to just take the time off that we needed to. And we knew if we didn't get back by August 1st, we could take a couple more weeks if we wanted to. So having that flexibility and just picking the route as we went made the experience what it was.
And did you guys just use Google Maps for routing, or was there a type of app that you could use or anything like that?
Well, Google Maps, I had bought there's a nonprofit that sells routes, and they have the middle, upper, and lower routes in the United States. And so I had bought the maps for the middle route, and which we started on, and then the upper route, which was the northern route, which we did in North Dakota and Minnesota, and then we kind of made that little dog leg across Canada ourselves. We just decided to do that. I thought it would be great to come back across Niagara Falls, and we end up camping right up on the Niagara River, just on the other side of the falls, and doing some swimming and touristing around there, which was fun.
Oh man, sounds like so much fun.
So it was good to have the professional bike route maps as an option. So looking at those, that was great, because they did say, we recommend this route because there's not a lot of traffic, there's not a lot of potholes. Like, they have bikers go on them regularly to see what the options are. And that was our issue in North Dakota, is we planned on taking the exact route recommended, but there was a lot of flooding at that time. So we couldn't go on the side roads, and we didn't want to take the time to kind of not know if it was a flooded road, not know if it was, and most interstates get cleared first. So we just said, screw it, let's just get on the interstate.
Actually, in the North Dakota, part of it was due to you've heard of the fracking and the oil that's being produced in North Dakota now. Well, that used to be the bike route. And then when they started doing the oil rush got started up there was no places to camp. And the local people told us, hey, if you try to bike up there today, you're going to get killed, because there's a constant stream of these oil trucks, and these are very narrow roads with these huge trucks just banging along at 70 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And so all the locals recommend don't bike up there anymore. Oh, wow. It was beautiful at one point in time, but we used a lot of local knowledge. The guy, Michael, told us about how do we get out of one area, and other people we met along the way, would say, well, you shouldn't do this. We actually went through some hot springs in Nevada that somebody at that Middlegate station over drinks told us, well, you shouldn't do that, you should do this, and we stopped by a hot springs and some things that we wouldn't have found if we hadn't talked to him.
Great question from Patty, where we actually bought the routes from. I personally can't remember it right now. Do you?
I will, if you can email or text me, I will look it up and send you a link to it.
We'll make sure that we let everyone know what routes, what maps we actually did purchase, but don't know it off the top of our heads. Another question came in also of if we had internet. So we would have internet at most of our campsites, actually. We would do a lot. We loved staying at KOAs, I believe. They were a higher end. They had, we knew they had solid showers. They had a good place for us to plug our camper in. So we actually had power, like had lights and things like that. So whenever we'd stay at certain campsites, we would have internet. And I actually had a blog that I carried the entire summer while I was traveling. So every time I had the chance to, we would jump on. I'd do a quick blog post while we were in the campsite. And that was part of why we'd take the time to all right, we're going to bike 30 miles today. And then I would jump on, do a blog post. Somebody else could read a book. Somebody could go hiking. Everyone kind of did their own thing. And that I think helped our group dynamic a lot as well, because then we didn't feel like we were always on top of each other.
We met another really interesting group. There was like 5 guys that were doing something similar to us. They had a driver, but rather than having a pop-up, they just had the van, and they would just set up camps. They'd put their tents in the campsite. And we stayed at the Middlegate Station in Nevada with that group of guys, and then kind of biked along with them for a little bit.
So would you both suggest having a supported ride for the entire journey? And if you were to do it again, would you make sure it was supported?
Yes, and Kim and I had done a lot of biking before we did this trip, where we were doing what I call credit card biking, where you carry extra clothes and a computer and whatever you want, but you're staying at hotels and restaurants, and eating in restaurants. And I decided I was old enough that I didn't want to carry camping stuff. Okay, and it really turns what I feel like was a joy into. I've talked to a lot of people that have biked across the country, and that are really strong people. And when they were camping, the ones that camping, they get into a grind that they're just, you're just working hard all the time and carrying extra 30 or 40 pounds of weight with you. Well, as a hiker, you know what 30 or 40 pounds of weight can do, and it's hard to carry it up hills. And then the time it takes to set up camp. I mean, it was really nice to be able to have Alex pop the camper up, and he didn't fix the meals for us, but he had the camper set up, and we didn't have to take the camper down and clean up around the area. So it really made it really, really nice. You could have done it with a couple of extra people too. So I highly recommend it as a means of dealing with it.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it just made the experience more of what it was, being able to carry a book or other clothes or a computer and not have to count every single pound that you're carrying on your panniers or on your bike, I think was great. And being able to say, well, actually we want to go somewhere else and we'll just go look at a museum, having that car, having that vehicle, being able to slack pack us so that we didn't have to pick up and go to a new campsite every day, made it so that we could do 20-mile days and just go back to the same campsite. But it also meant that if we wanted to do 120-mile days, we weren't exhausted putting it up and then going to, scrounge up food at the end of the night. So it did give us that flexibility.
Wow. And you guys, what was the exact number of miles? It was around
4,000 miles.
4,000. And what
it was really, really close to exactly 4. I mean, it wasn't exactly, but it may have been 3,987 or something.
Yeah.
And with that, like before, I know you said you both biked often, but what was the longest trip you did before biking across the nation?
1,000.
We had done 1,000-mile trip before.
We had done, numerous trips before. We did a 500-mile trip. We did a 700-mile up and around Nova Scotia. And then our longest was 1,000 miles from Hanover, New Hampshire, all the way down to Alexandria, right outside DC. No, we went down to North Carolina. I apologize. We actually went all the way down to North Carolina. So that was our longest beforehand. So we knew we could do it. You just keep going.
One of the comments I would make about making a decision to have I looked into going on a paid trip, and it would, for $8,000 a person, there was a group that did a group ride across the United States. They were taking a different route than what we did, but it was $8,000 a person to do that. But they were going to do it in, rather than we took 70 days. They were going to do it like in 50 or 60 days, and they had a fixed schedule, and that you knew where every hotel that you were going to stay in for the whole trip. And I just knew that there were times when I wanted to take a break. When, if you're part of a big group like that, you can ride, but then you haven't biked across every mile of the cross country, you know. And I just decided I wanted to do it my way, rather than following a route like that, like the paid trip was.
Yeah. And would you do anything different if you were to do it again? Is there anything that you felt, oh, maybe we could have done this differently, or just?
Well, now that I'm 70 and I'm in the electric bike business, I'd use an electric bike to help me get up the hills. But
you definitely go further too. You want to be doing 120 miles or 200 miles. You might get up to 300.
I don't know that I'd want to do more, because it really kind of, you get into a good pattern. But going up some of the hills, I did that at 66 and I was fine. The first week and a half or 2 weeks before my legs got up, you know, I must have, I biked off 25 pounds in the first month.
Oh,
you know, so, and I was really strong by the time we were cranking along there.
Yes, you guys.
We all collectively either lost weight, gained muscle, whichever it came out to, but we definitely all became very, very lean. I mean, just months of working out, basically. I wouldn't change anything, except for I would take switchbacks seriously. I had no idea that switchbacks could be that tight and that aggressive and that dangerous. So I would take speed limits seriously when they're going down a hill on a bike.
Yeah, I know, Robert, you told me a story that you almost got a ticket for going too fast on a bike.
I did get a ticket.
You got the ticket.
I did. I passed a policeman in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and he was going 25.
I think you were going like 35.
I was actually coming down the Norwich Hills. It was in Norwich.
It's funny.
Oh, man.
It was funny.
But also, you know, just a question on my end too is, when you guys finished, how was it getting back to the everyday life, not having to bike every day? I mean, did you actually feel pretty down a little bit, or how was it?
I kind of came straight back, and I was working at Ramonto's Brick and Brew as just a server at that time. So I immediately came back and tried to make some money before going back to college. So I kind of came back and hit the ground running. I definitely felt like I missed a little bit more of the athletic part of things, and working out as much. But I think I came back and I was just so busy that I immediately came back and went back to school, and I was a Division I rower. So I immediately went back and was still doing some active stuff. But the hardest thing for me was always the eating factor of, you go from working out and biking 120 miles every day and eating 6,000 plus calories a day, and you could eat whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, to, okay, now you can go back to your normally regularly scheduled eat what you're like your 2,000 or whatever calories you're supposed to. And it was like, but I want that. And that was the hardest part for me, was not eating everything.
I just went back to my group. I biked for 25 years with a group that did like 40 miles on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then would do 60 or 70 on Saturdays and Sundays. And I just went back into my group. So I was only biking 40 instead of biking 100 every day.
Did they notice a difference?
He was
I was
faster than
very
them all.
strong when I got up that.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well,
hey,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I appreciate all of you participants that have joined us and listening to this, and love to, maybe we should have a powwow around the campfire in the summer and talk about bike trips sometime.
That sounds like a great social outing for us all to do when we're able to be together.
Yeah, and maybe even go on a little, not, a bike ride. Maybe not a
Well, we might not bike across the country, but we could go on a ride together.
Yeah, but honestly, guys, this has been such an inspiring talk. I loved hearing your story, your journey, and just learning about what it really takes to bike across the nation. And I mean, there's, that, hey, anyone can do it. All you got to do is, get one foot on the pedal, don't forget about the other, and start going.
Yes,
but,
indeed.
Yeah. So other than that, though, I think, it's 7:15. If anyone else has any questions, you can definitely shoot them along. But we are recording this talk, and it will get posted on our YouTube channel. And I will be sending out a thank you to everyone that participated with that link. So you'll be able to review this. Please share it with friends. We're so excited to do this. And it's this Adventure Talk series. We want to continue to do things like this. As Robert and Kim talked about, even getting something around the campfire, or, hey, having a community ride. We're going to continue to do such fun things around here. So definitely stay updated. And Kim and Robert, anything you'd like to say before signing off?
Look forward to biking with everyone in the future, hopefully.
Yes, thanks for joining us, and come by and take an electric bike ride. They changed the whole dynamic of this, particularly if once you're not a spring chicken like these two.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Thank you. And just for the winter, there always are some activities to do as well. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your night. Bye, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.